Warning. The following video contains strong language that some viewers may find offensive or disturbing.
All doctors of Reddit. Has there ever been a time when you were in public and saw a person with a serious medical illness that was unknown to them? If so, did you advise them to get it checked out? I had a non-medical doctor, one of my high school math teachers, point out to me that he noticed that I always fall asleep in his class. He didn't bring it up because he thought I was slacking in his class. He brought it up because based on his observations of how I fell asleep made him believe that I should be tested for narcolepsy. Behold, I had a neurological and sleep study evaluation. And I was diagnosed with narcolepsy. When I was young, around 12 to 13, I started to really annoy my parents because I'd randomly make a grunting sound. During movies, just chatting, parents thought I was just trying to be annoying, doing it for fun. I had a friend whose parents were doctors, and after having hung out with them for a while they took my mom aside and said, "Think Savison has Tourette's." It wasn't a life-threatening illness or anything. And luckily my form of Tourette's is very minor. My parents felt so bad for giving me crap about being annoying when they found out. I was hanging out with a buddy, doctor, in a bar, and the bartender's eyeballs were very bulgy. He mentioned that his thyroid could have an issue and should seek care. He ended up being correct in his assessment. MD here. Hadn't been at my parents' house in over a year. I live overseas. The lady that helps them with cleaning has been in our family for over a decade. I noticed a nodule on her neck. Checked it out and didn't like it. Sent her to be tested, thyroid cancer. Ended up having surgery and radioactive iodine treatment. She's okay now. A family member is a doctor, and a man in his 60s crashed into their parked car. The man said he wasn't sure what had happened. That he must have been distracted. He was speaking and acting completely coherent but a bit upset, understandably. My family member suggested he should see a doctor and ask for a brain MRI. Turned out he had a brain tumor and passed away within 6 months. My little brother is diabetic and has been since he was 5. We did lots of research and learned how to train diabetic alert dogs to smell his blood sugar. Diabetics smell fruity when high even to people, but dogs can smell highs and lows. His service dog would often alert on strangers at restaurants and such. Usually it's too crowded to tell who she is alerting on. But we have told a few people on occasion. I was walking behind an elderly chap at my gym and noticed a deformity on his scalp that looked like a basal cell carcinoma, a type of skin cancer. I introduced myself as a doctor and recommended that he have it checked out by his GP. I've not seen him since to get an update, but I like to think that he did attend. I was at a restaurant and noticed a Kaiser-Fleischer ring in the waiter's eye and mentioned that he may possibly have liver disease. I was really nervous about telling him, as it may have been too forward. He was very appreciative and said he was being treated for it already. I had literally just taken my state and national boards and received my license a week prior, and that exact diagnosis question was on it. Even though it has nothing to do with my specialty. Someone approached my uncle at the beach and told him his yellow thighs were indicative of a liver problem. It was. And thanks to that he caught it in time to help reverse the damage. One of my cousins is a cardiologist. He met my buddy for 5 minutes while I was getting a driver and vehicle for them. No idea what was said. But my buddy saw a doctor. Turns out he had a heart problem and eventually had to get a valve put in. The first time I met my dad's best friend, who is a nurse, he introduced himself and then told me I had chickenpox. He was right, and that's when I learned you can get chickenpox twice. My grandma was in hospital for some unrelated issue. Some random doctor walks by, stops, and asks her if she always had a nose and lips that big. At first she got really mad. Because he was so direct. But after he explained he was writing a research paper about acromegaly, a rare form of a brain tumor, and recognized the symptoms with her. Fair enough. After a checkup they found the tumor, removed it, And now my grandma still well over 10 years later as part of that research paper. Not a doctor, but I fell asleep on an airplane and the lady told me after I woke up that it sounds like I have sleep apnea like her husband did. I went to the doctor to have it checked out. I ended up having surgery to fix it and if complete changed my life health-wise. Not a doctor, but I witnessed such a thing. We were camping in a fairly remote spot, one other couple on a large campground. And a young family. We lit a large fire and all shared it. The male of the other couple kept looking at the boy. About 8 years old or so. He eventually said that he was a surgeon. And had the child had a fall or been hit with anything recently, the mother replied. Yes, he had fallen out of a tree earlier in the day, but was just shaken up. The doctor asked if they would mind if he had a closer look, and then said, you need to get that looked at, I'm sure he's fractured his eye socket. Edit, spelling errors. 13 years ago I was home for my grandma's funeral. Hanging out with my brothers for a few days afterwards. One of them a nurse, now a CRNA. We were going to bed on my last night here and I said, isn't it weird how my legs do this? My socks were leaving indentations at the top. Due to edema. He said I needed to get it checked out right away. Got back to the Dominican Republic. Turned out I had an autoimmune disorder that was attacking my kidneys. Long story short, got into a trial program at Mayo Clinic which saved my kidneys and my life. My mom works with genetic disorders. Once we were on holidays with another family and one of them brought along a school friend. My mom noticed this friend had the symptoms of a certain genetic disorder. I think it was Marfan's, but it was a few years ago so I'm not completely sure. Since she didn't know the kids' parents, she ended up explaining everything to the other parents and getting them to pass the information along to the kids' parents so that they could consider genetic testing. My brother is a doctor. At Christmas my two brothers, my brother-in-law, and I were drinking beers in a hot tub. My doc bro pointed to a mole on my bro-law's shoulder and said, you really need to get that thing checked. Like this week. Sure enough, it was melanoma. I am on the opposite side of the question. I had someone approach me very discreetly and say that she noticed I had a swelling on my neck. She recommended for me to get my thyroid levels checked. I had been going through a mystery health problem and mentioned the encounter to the doctor at my next appointment. He ran the blood and I was off the charts for hyperthyroidism. For the next 5 years it was a struggle to get my levels anywhere close to normal and I almost went into storm a few times. I nearly died. If that stranger hadn't approached me, I doubt I would be here. Sad thing is that I was terribly upset at the lady for ages because my life turned upside down from that day. She saved me and I blamed her. I was young and dumb. My uncle showed up at Christmas with a seriously droopy eye. He told everyone he'd been to the eye doctor who told him it was fine and would heal. My mother is a nurse who told him to immediately go to the hospital, as she felt he was showing signs of a brain tumor. She was right. He had a pituitary tumor. They caught it in time to prevent permanent damage. I'm not a doctor, but I had to take my boss aside and tell her she should go get her blood sugar tested. She stunk of diabetes and she listened and went. It was out of control and she thanked me later. My dad was gaining weight in his belly and one day his belly button popped out, so we poked fun and called it his baby belly. Finally a family friend, who was a doctor, asked if he could feel my dad's stomach and told him he had a hernia. My dad never told us he was golfing a few months earlier when he fell to the ground in pain after swinging, so we never questioned that his belly was anything but weight gain. Sat next to a guy at the airport. And when he got up to walk, I noticed some subtle things about his gait. Then I paid more attention and saw reduced facial expressions and reduced blinking, and finally got up the nerve to start small talk and eventually asked if a doctor ever mentioned Parkinson's disease. There are a few things that mimic PD. But he did have it in his family. The situation was awkward. And he did thank me and said he would get checked out. But in retrospect I should have just let it be, there isn't a cure. And I at the very least caused him anxiety. At worst, I could have ruined his day and vacation. Eventually, as the disease progresses, he would have been diagnosed eventually and started on treatment. I have also told people to get a mole checked out. That's a fairly low-risk conversation. I think a lot of doctors notice things regularly about others and don't say anything for a number of reasons. My dad has a very slow-growing, i.e., it will not be the thing to kill him, form of lymphoma. Now he already knew about it and had begun treatment. But a doctor acquaintance noticed the swollen lymph node in passing down a hallway one day and said something like, "I hope this isn't rude or too forward. But I feel responsible for pointing out XYZ in case you weren't already aware." We obviously already knew full well what was up. But my dad really appreciated someone speaking up to bring something potentially very serious to his attention. Little things like that could be a life or death difference. Edit update for the folks who have shared stories of themselves or loved ones with the opposite experience of having to advocate for your own health. My heart goes out to you. Apart from my father's mild case, I, like too many people, have all too much experience with the ravages of cancer, and I hope we can all agree the spectacular nurses and doctors who devote their lives to the well-being of others aren't to blame. But a constricting and profiteering healthcare system, at least in the US, that needs dire improvement is the cause. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification button. See you next time.